Crucify him, crucify him. Take off your shoes, Felicia. You are on holy ground. The Bible didn't do that. Love did that. Yoga was just demonic. But I believe trust is something that is given. There's a sacred, because we're made in the image. So who am I?
Welcome to the Impact Nations podcast. My name is Tim. I am your host, and today I am very excited to introduce you to our first-time guest, Felicia Murrell. We've been just having a gas. Actually, before we even started hitting record here, we were having fun together, and I know you guys are really going to enjoy your time with her. She's a master life coach. She's a former pastor. She's got 20 years of church leadership experience, but she's also an author, and she has written this new book. It's called The Restorative Power of Love in an Either-Or World. And folks, I got to tell you, I picked it up again this morning just to prepare for our time together again, and I couldn't put it down. I was actually late for work today, and it's Felicia's fault. Felicia, welcome to the show.
Tim, I'm so elated to be here. Thank you so much for having me on and for the warm welcome for both me and for the book. It really means the world to me.
Well, we're very pleased, and I tell you what, I should tell our audience that I met you because our friend Bradley Jerzak, who is a frequent guest of the show, he said you've got to meet Felicia. So I always do what Bradley tells me to do. So I'm glad I did this time.
Bradley Jerzak is a very wise man, so I try
Yes,
to listen to his counsel.
indeed. Felicia, maybe we could just get to know you a little bit. Could you just give us some of your backstory? You grew up in the American South, and I think that a lot of us might think we know what that's like, but maybe just paint a picture for us of kind of where you're coming from.
Yeah, I did. I grew up in the American South, which I think even today is probably a little different from the landscape it was when I grew up. I was born in the early 70s. So my background there is primarily, all of the 70s into the early 80s. And I left North Carolina at age 17, really wanting to never return. But the South in the 70s and early 80s was still coming out of a Jim Crow mindset. So it was
Mm.
still very much growing up in the South. There's a saying that the South worked because everyone knew its place. And so there was a kind of unspoken hierarchy, a kind of unspoken way of doing things that, you kind of stepped to the side or stepped off the sidewalk when white people walked by, or you
Mm.
deferred. There was always a deferral or a demur. It really wasn't until the 90s where you started to see genuine friendships out in public. That's not to
Mm.
say that they did not exist before then, but there was not a lot of commingling of races. Our towns were divided by tracks. And specifically, I'll speak to the town that I grew up in. When I was growing up, all the blacks lived on one side of the tracks and whites lived on the other. And the majority of your economic establishments, businesses, grocery stores, those kinds of things were all on the other side of the track. And so you cross the track, and you cross the track with intention. My grandmother or my mom or my aunties would say, you go to the store, get what you need, and you come right back. Like there were certain rules and codes that you just followed to survive and to get along. Um, Thankfully, alongside of that existence, my maternal grandmother moved to Washington, D.C., which for us was north. Some people would still say D.C. is the American South, but for us, it was north. And she moved there before I was born. So I was actually born in Washington, D.C., and then raised in the American South. But every summer, my brother and I would spend in Washington, D.C. with my grandmother. And so we kind of had this almost city mouse, country mouse upbringing. But that time with my grams was very formative for me because she made sure to expose us to a world larger than what we knew in our everyday existence. And through exposure to the arts and to the zoo and to the Smithsonian museums and Union Station, and she worked at George Washington University at the hospital there, which is famous because it's where Ronald Reagan went when he got shot.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
Yeah. But because of those experiences, I had both. And so it created in me a kind of spaciousness to hold promise and understanding of life beyond the one that I lived every day.
You talk about a city divided by the tracks, the railroad tracks, and you had the black community, the African American community on one side, and the white community on the other. Um, how how can we fix that? I mean, I know that we've made great strides since the 70s for sure, but we've got a long way to go. But you say that welcoming and accepting of diversity can create familiarity, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we still truly know each other. And I think that we've made some strides in terms of diversity, but I get the sense, especially from reading some of your writing, I think part of what you're trying to say is no, but we need to know each other at a much deeper level, at a more intimate level. How do we do that? How do we truly know somebody, especially somebody who's coming from perhaps the other side of the tracks? They've got a different story, a different history than we understand.
Yeah, that's a really great question. Um, I do believe that great strides have been made, that there have been wonderful things, even now, and it's been a while since I've been back home, but even in the 2000s and going, back home, um, it's amazing to see a mix of races living on both sides of the track. My grandmother moved back to North Carolina in 94, and she intentionally bought a house on the white side of the tracks. I'm using air quotes. And she was one of the first, but she was not the last
Mm.
who did that. And the realtor tried to show her places on the other side, and she was very intentional, like, no, this is where I'm going to buy my house. And so she lived there, and she has since passed on, but my cousin owns that property now. And so I think you're right in seeing, and thank you for pointing that out. Diversity is a start. And someone once said, diversity is having and welcoming differences in backgrounds, belief, and behavior. And I think diversity is different from belonging. And when I talk about a deeper type of knowing, I'm moving from diversity into belonging. And belonging would be a person's perceptions of acceptance and feeling heard, seen, and respected. So diversity is everyone is invited to the party. And um, belonging would be being asked input into the playlist for the dance music
Hmm.
and dancing like no one is watching. And so when I say that, I'm thinking of workplaces, churches, schools, athletic events that now are very much integrated. And so a lot of times, because I go to work with someone of a different race, or I go to church, or I'm in a program or athletic event with someone of a different race, I can sometimes have the mindset of, oh, I have Black friends, or Muslim friends, or Asian friends, or, for me, white friends, and the contextual relationship makes me think that I know this person, that there's a knowing. And oftentimes it's not a knowing, there's a familiarity. And
Mhm.
um, and belonging is when there's no part of a person that has to be hid or withheld, that it can be accepted. I can bring all of me. I have places where, um, you know, I can fully unrobe. That's belonging. And
Yeah.
I think when we move beyond just making space for diversity and equity into an empathetic and compassionate kind of witness with one another, it leads us closer to this type of knowing.
Yeah. Uh, Follow-up question. How do you, Felicia Murrell, know when you've reached that place where you can really, I guess, expose yourself in terms of allow somebody to really in. That must be a very risky maneuver to take that plunge to finally reach a place where you're like, okay, well, here's the real me. Um, is there some sort of signal you're looking for? How do you know when it's time to move beyond familiarity?
Yeah, that I will tell a story. for that to as part of my answer. And but first, before I tell the story, I want to say that involves vulnerability and it involves trust.
Yeah.
And often we think that trust is something that is earned, but I believe trust is something that is given. And I have to choose as part of a sacred act of self and um, intentionally, embracing interconnection with others to give that, right? And so there was during the pandemic, I got a lot of invitations to speak because most churches were online and had pivoted that way. And so it was easy, for people to invite me to speak at their church and in that manner. And so there was a church in Michigan that had invited me to speak. And prior to the time that I was supposed to come on, they asked me to, come in and get to know their staff a little bit and just introduce me to the staff and that. And I don't even know what we were talking about, but we were talking about something and joking. And I tend to be very passionate about everything really. Like Doug, my husband Doug says, Felicia, everything is a 10 with you. It's all a 10. And so, but what that means is when I get excited, my voice goes up and I get really like, and if you don't know me, you will assume that I'm mad or that
Mm.
I'm angry or that, this bothers me when I'm just really being passionate. I could have no kind of feels about it at all, but it just comes out in a passionate expression. And and I lost myself in the passion of expression. And all of a sudden, I it got really quiet in all the little boxes of Zoom. And one of the ladies who's now actually a really good friend of mine, she goes, "Well, dang, Felicia, tell us how you really feel." And when she said it, it made me like look up and look into my camera at all the faces. And you could feel like I don't know where to go from here. I don't know what to
Mm.
say. You could almost sense the gasp from people. And I realized, oh, this room is not yet ready for that part of me. So let's
Oh.
dial it back, right? And but there are places that I have that they're ready. They allow me to be fully me, and I can say something, and there's no shock value or sense of threat, or oh my gosh, is she angry, or should I run, or you don't sense the discomfort come up.
Yeah.
And I think often for um, Black people are not a monolith, so I don't want to speak too broadly and widely for all Black people because
Yeah.
situations and lived experiences are different. But I think particularly when you have been formed in the American South, because there's always going to be some muscle memory and um, some ways that you move around people, um, you're cautious of that. Doug and I moved from the South to Albuquerque, New Mexico in 2019. And we lived in New Mexico for 2 years, 2.5 years. And in the move, everyone was like, "Do you really want to move to Albuquerque?"
And by the way, I should say, Felicia, I've been there. I live in Albuquerque, moved here from
So
Vancouver.
then you're,
So we're filming on this
yeah.
on my end of the conversation. We're in Albuquerque right now. So I know exactly how that question, like, what? Where? Why?
And people were like, "Are do you really want to move there?" And our thing was, we have a very eclectic group of friends, um, racially, socioeconomically, faith traditions. It's just a very eclectic mix. It's not homogenous by any means. And so in our minds, moving to Albuquerque can't be any different than anything we've ever experienced. It's going to be fine. Yes, it's 3.7% African American population, but we're used to being minorities in predominant spaces. This is a walk in the park, no problem.
Mm.
And living there for me felt like being thrown back into my childhood. And I
Wow.
was absolutely surprised at the number of racial incidences that I experienced while I was living there.
Mm.
And at one point, I remember saying to my husband, Doug, I, I fought too hard to be the person I am today, to move from a person of anger with a propensity to violence and rage and fear, that I don't want to live armored up, right? And so in order for me to risk that vulnerability, to have the knowing, to have the belonging, I cannot live armored up. And a lot of times I didn't know what I was walking into. I didn't know if I was going to walk into a restaurant and be served. I didn't know if I would walk into a Walmart and the cashier not take money from my hand, demand that I put it on the counter. I didn't know if I would walk into, a brewery and record scratch and it goes silence. I didn't know. And
Yeah.
sometimes it was the complete opposite of, people just welcoming and friendly, and but I didn't know. I didn't know what my day would hold. And because I didn't know, that meant that I went out armored up. And where someone may have trying to be soft and nice and welcoming, because my defenses were already armored to protect myself from hurt or more macroaggressions. They really weren't micro at all. But I couldn't receive it, because anytime we put up armor to protect ourselves, we also, that armor also blocks love from coming in, right?
Mm, yeah.
And so I did not want to be that person. I did not
Yeah.
want to return to an armored up kind of person.
Mm.
And I think sadly, so much of our world invites us to do that, but I'm hoping that love will extend a different kind of invitation.
Uh, you've touched on so many things there. I could go so many different directions. We're going to get to all of them, I hope, today. But right in the beginning of your book, you talk about ordering your day to participate in love. And I I reread it like three times because I just thought, what a it's such a simple sentence and yet so deep and profound. And I think you've just touched a little bit on perhaps what that doesn't look like. But what does it look like to order your day uh, to participate in love?
That's really huge for me, Tim, and thank you for asking, because it forms every part of my credo and every part of who I am. I do begin my day with I wake up and I say, all that is eternal within me greets the wonder of this day. And so I start that way because I want to intentionally and consciously posture my heart to the awareness of wonder and awe. I don't want to lose that. I think oftentimes we think of something that awes us or wows us, or that wonder with nature, right? Like New Mexico, the Sandia Mountains, the sunsets in the Southwest, the, yeah, the beauty of a artichoke bloom. I mean, just those things wow us. And when we see things in nature like a sunset, a sunrise, the ocean, the mountains, they cause our defenses to come down. Those are the thinnest moments when you know that there is something in the world that's bigger than yourself, and that you are connected to that something or that someone, and that really all of everything is connected in that web. I mean, you sense it, with that. And often it's very easy for us to have those kind of transcendental moments, if you will, that are here or there when we're on vacation, and or we're out on a hike or whatever like that. um, when we wake up and we have to get into the grind and the rut of our day, it's not so easy to have that. And
Yeah.
so my intention is to start my day with a posture of awe and wonder, because in posturing myself that way, I welcome vulnerability.
Yeah.
So that's my first thing. And then people ask often about my spiritual practices, and they're really mixed, but the constant is an intentional turning of my heart toward the divine, toward God, the Holy Three, face to face to face. And what I mean when I say that is, I always have this image in my head of like a roaring waterfall, right? And then just downwind of the waterfall is a water wheel. So this waterfall is producing massive amounts of water that's rushing, and that water produces something. And when it turns on the water wheel, it creates energy, and water is poured in. And so that is love filling me up. This is me participating with love. Love fills me up. But then on the water wheel, that water pours out. And that is self emptying or kenosis. And that water pours out. And that is me participating with love and pouring out the overflow of the love that fills me. How that looks day to day, whatever role and function that is, it changes, right? But that's the participation. So I'm ordering myself from a posture of awe, which helps me intentionally be vulnerable. And then I can move and live and have my being as part of the water wheel of love.
Mm, that's beautiful. We were talking with a guest recently on the show about this false division between the secular and the spiritual realm and stuff. And what I love about even just the imagery you just gave, but before that, you just talked about uh, being in awe of this beauty and splendor and feeling connected to the world around us, to creation. And I think that that's very much tapping into that refusal to say, no, well, no, the material world is one thing and the spiritual world is another. And you're able to look at the material world around you and see the creator himself in his creation.
Yeah, for me, all matter matters. And
Mm,
for me, all matter is sacred, right?
yeah.
And so, and I remember this time of just part of my um, untangling of beliefs and ideas and theology, other people's theology from truth, was an invitation that Spirit gave me, and it's been over a decade ago. But Spirit said, Felicia, I want you to hand me everything that you believe to be true about God, and I will give back to you what is truth, big T, capital truth. And I remember the invitation vividly and thinking this is kind of like a one-time things, so it was an easy yes for me in that. But really it's been a lifelong journey of that. And coming out of my faith tradition background is more charismatic Pentecostal. So
Mhm.
um and growing up, I was my husband and I was literally just joking about this last night. Everything was demonic. So anything that you were against essentially was assigned, it was demonized, right? Because if
Yeah.
it's demonic, then you definitely don't do it. So the Catholic Church was demonic, cards were demonic, wearing pants was demonic, wearing makeup was demonic, everything literally there was a small box of what was not demonic and everything else was demonic. And I was sharing with my spiritual director a time of grief for me in that years ago when our oldest daughter was in middle school. We were living in Nashville, Tennessee at the time, and the middle school was doing yoga for PE. And the church we were in,
Definitely
yoga,
demonic.
of course, was demonic, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't that yoga was just demonic. I mean, we were taught that, the minute you did a pose, demons entered you and possessed you. So it was really demonic. It was really demonic. And I was again passionate, Felicia. I was bought in hook, line, and sinker. And so when my daughter came home to say this was, what they were going to be doing in school, I was like, oh no, that's demonic. You can't do that. And so, Mama Bear, I'm going to protect my baby from being demon possessed. And I go down to the school, speak to the administrators, and they are so kind. They are
Mm,
so kind with me. So, yes, Mrs. Murrell, we understand. We'll find something else for her to do. And I'm still going on like, she can't even be in the room. Just the whole, I'm literally past 10 at this
yeah.
point. And they're like, okay, no problem. She can, be outside during that period in the like lobby area. Well, she can do her art things then. And they were so accommodating, so
Mm,
accommodating. And years later, in my journey, one of the things that, as Spirit was unraveling this idea of things being demonic, one of the things I heard so clearly was in order for something to be profaned or perverted, there has to be something sacred to begin with,
mm,
right? Like we don't get to profaning something without maligning its sacred. And so there was this invitation from spirit to not focus on the perversion or the profane, but where's the sacred? What in this is sacred? What in this is holy? Where can you see the awe and the wonder instead of demonizing it? And um, so that was the lesson that I had. And then shortly after that, spirit began inviting me on a journey to love my body the way I was loving my spirit and my soul, and to
Mm,
turn toward myself without accusation and judgment. And lo and behold, I started doing yoga. And one day on the way home, I had this image. It came to my head of that time going to my daughter's middle school and just, that whole thing. And I started weeping and
mm,
sobbing because all of a sudden I'm not even thinking about myself. I saw my daughter and I was like, oh my gosh, that had to be horrifically embarrassing for a young girl in middle school with all the peer pressure, with all the everything. And her mom's down there acting a nut and saying all these things. Not that I did it publicly, but still, she still had to, account for why she couldn't do this stretching exercise,
yeah.
and all of that. And so I called my daughter on the phone and I had to ask for forgiveness and explain why. She was very gracious to me, but that was a seal that's been set upon my heart, that so much of what we demonize, so much of what we say is bad, speaking from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, if we pause and we allow ourselves to see through the eyes of love, there's something redeemable, something reconcilable, something that could be restored. And at the core, there's something that's sacred. We're
Mm,
all burning bushes. We're all burning bushes. And
yeah.
so even when I get upset or concerned about perpetrators, even a perpetrator is a burning bush. There's inherent dignity, there's worth, there's a sacred, because we're made in the image. We're made in the
Wow.
image.
That's beautiful. I just want to rest in that for a moment. Which, by the way, you encourage us to do that. I was disobedient. I read your book too fast because you did say, read and just pause and soak in it for a while and then come back to it. And I just kept on turning pages. But there's a beauty in what you say in terms of just it really calls for a moment to just sit and rest in the truth of it. So thank you for being just such an encouragement in that regard. Um, I want to get into a whole bunch more. We're going to pause for a quick station break because you just mentioned inherent worth and dignity, Felicia, and that is something we hold very dear here at Impact Nations. We believe that ultimately the gospel is about us restoring dignity, restoring hope, restoring worth, or helping people see their worth in the eyes of Christ. And we do that in the developing world. We go into nations such as Malawi and Uganda and India and Nepal, and we work with a lot of women who have been robbed of that dignity, who have been robbed through human trafficking, slavery, forced prostitution, teenage pregnancy, and marriage, where they have been basically been force-fed this lie that you have no worth, you exist to be used. And we come in and we say, hey, no, you were made in the image of God, and you are inherently beautiful. And it is such a privilege to partner with our leaders around the world, many of whom, by the way, have come out of this very situation that they're now trying to address. And so know best how to grieve with those who are going through that. And we just rescue people. We rescue them from danger. And then we get them set up with ongoing counseling and mentorship and training and coaching and get them the skills that they're going to need to flourish long term, to be able to provide for themselves and their children for generations to come, we hope, right? That's our prayer. And so I've so enjoyed listening to you, Felicia, talking about these things and reading about it in some beautiful poetry, by the way, in this book. Because it's just that's our heart. It's what we long for, and so if that rings true to you as a listener today, I would encourage you check out impactnations.com. Just check out some of the beautiful stories of restoration, redemption, and think about becoming a monthly donor. One of the things that really helps us at Impact Nations to be able to say yes to one more life being changed, to one more life being radically transformed and rescued is those monthly gifts that help us just to get the job done. And right now, in the month of February, we've got a really cool deal. We're doing a thing called Heart for the Nations, where if you have a heart for the nations, if you have a heart for the poor, for the lost, for the oppressed, for the marginalized, you can give on a monthly basis, and your first month's gift is actually going to be matched by a very generous donor who has pledged, I think, up to $5,000 to say, hey, anybody who signs up for a monthly gift this month, or anybody who wants to increase their existing monthly gift, when they do that, their very first month's gift is actually going to be matched. So it's going to be doubled, just like that. So when you sign up for $100 a month, guess what? It just turned into $200 for this month. So I would encourage you, head to impactnations.com/monthly, learn how you can become a monthly donor. Every little bit helps. I promise you that. And so if you give, we're listeners. You guys know we're rescuing children from slavery in the brick factories in northern India. It costs $150 a one time to get the child out of the brick factory and into school. My goodness, even if you just sign up for whatever it is, $15 a month, you've just covered the cost of one child every single year getting out of slavery and into school, forever changing their family tree. So impactnations.com/monthly. Join us, help us restore dignity and hope to the lost and the oppressed and the marginalized in the world. Okay, sorry about that, Felicia, but I just, as you were talking about restoring dignity, I just want to invite people to actually participate in doing that all over the world. It's a wonderful opportunity.
I'm
Um,
glad that was so beautiful.
you talked a few minutes ago about having to battle the temptation, if you will, to enter into vengeful thinking, into violent reactions and things like that. You quote in your book Dr. King, who told us that darkness cannot overcome darkness; only light can do that. Uh, and yet, you also call us to go deep into the process of grieving. And of course, grief can very quickly give way to a sense of longing for vengeance, and may, in some cases lead to violence and things like that. How do we hold these two things in tension of wanting to go through the grieving process? It's a healthy thing, and yet resist the urge to go right off the edge.
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think for me, a lot of that is learning that feelings don't require fixing; they require feeling. And part of grieving, part of that is feeling the rage, feeling the anger, feeling all of that, allowing it to be, learning to scan your body and to feel where those sensations are rising in your body. Are your shoulders tight? Are there butterflies in your belly? Are your,
Hmm.
shin bones tight and burning? Where are you feeling that? I call it big mad. Where are you feeling big mad? Where are you feeling the rage and the anger? And to touch that, to actually to acknowledge with gratitude that you feel, because that means that you're human and that you care, right? And what a lot of times why we respond in vengeance or with revenge or act out is because we don't know how to hold that feeling or what to do with it. We don't know what to do with the energy. And so our first response is to get it up and out of us and onto something or someone else, which is scapegoating and blame shifting. And we want to project that out. But part of grieving and lament is learning to hold. And so I can say, I can touch my heart and go mad, mad. Like I feel mad right here. And this is what I feel. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't require me to do something with it other than feeling, because in the acknowledgement, in the truth telling, in the feeling, what happens with that, I believe, is that spirit comes alongside and takes that energy of mad and begins to transform it. Um, and so there's an alchemical thing that happens that we don't see as we participate with truth, that love is always with us, right? And so there's something that's happening inside of that where we don't have to turn that into revenge onto someone else. But it's, there's a part of us too that wants to make people pay. We want to crucify him, crucify him,
Hmm.
you know And so that's real. But
Yeah.
now when I feel that, what do I do with it? And
Yeah.
that's the invitation.
Crucify him, crucify him. You you have some interesting points here, well received, regarding capital punishment, uh, executions versus an attitude that is pro-life, which of course, in many contexts in America, at least, when we say pro-life or when the conservatives say pro-life, they actually mean anti-abortion. And you point that out. Like, how can we hold that to be true? Anti-abortion. We need to protect the sanctity of life at the beginning of life, and yet there is this need for revenge, for crucify him when it comes to perpetrators who uh, some feel need to be executed. Um, how can we as a society broaden our understanding of the phrase pro-life?
That is a really great question. Um, Everyone is a burning bush. Everyone is a burning bush. We are more than the worst thing that we've ever done.
Mm,
And I think when we can learn to hold space humbly for our actions are not who we are, but because we are in such a work driven productivity labor type of um, ecosystem, the first thing we do when we meet people often is, "Hi, my name is Felicia. What do you do?"
mhm.
Right? We never ask someone, "Who are you?" I once
Yeah.
asked the question, and I'm pretty sure it's in the book. I asked the question, "Can you say who you are without the apostrophe of someone else's possession, without a role and function?"
Hmm.
I am. What comes after I am? Is it I am an author? I am a teacher, I am a preacher, I am a speaker. Those are all roles and functions. They're not who I am. So who am I? Who am I besides Doug's wife, the kid's mom, my friend's friend? Who am I apart from all of these roles and all of these functions? And the same with our actions. If I learn to see people beyond their character defects and beyond their worst behaviors, then I'm going to have less of a propensity to demand death for an action
Hmm.
because I can hold that. Even Paul Young uses the term dung covered diamonds, that even with all the dung, right, that there's still a diamond there, and
Yeah,
we don't easily discard diamonds. We tend to cherish those.
that's beautiful. Um, I want to talk a little bit about your title. Um, Particularly the bottom half of the cover here says in an either or world, the restorative power of love in an either or world. And that hints at this dualism. What do you when you write that, what do you mean by either or world?
It's exactly that. It's the dualisms, the dualities, the binaries that we see. And I think largely because, particularly in America, we are a Christian nation. And so much of our origin story with the Bible sadly begins with original sin and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And um, while that is one of the creation stories there, what speaks to me most is the tree of life. And it is beginning with original blessing and beginning with God, spirit hovering over the deep. And that evening and morning were the first day. So it is not, the split, it's both and. It was evening and morning that created a whole day. And so inside of that, when our focus is from the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, right away we set up polarities. Right away we create a chasm and a divide, and we're asking people to land on one side or the other. But when you look at things through the tree of life, you see things, I believe that you have a greater capacity to hold both and without necessarily parsing them in that way. And that's part of mystery is it doesn't require certainty in the same way that binaries and dualism require of us.
Yeah.
um, So that's what I mean when I say either or. It is definitely that binary. But I think love invites us to hold the tension of opposites, to hold contradictions, to hold
Mhm.
mystery in a more sacred way than forcing us to choose that type of a side. So when people
Yeah.
ask me what side I'm on the side of love.
That sounds like a cop out, Felicia.
I've heard that too. And that's
I
okay.
bet you have. Yeah. One instance of this that I can think of in the public sphere, in the political sphere, that jumps to mind is the arguments about gun control. And very often when we have, unfortunately, far too often, it's happening when we have these mass killings, with some automatic weapon, semi-automatic weapon, and many will say, hey, we need to ban guns. And then people say, well, it's not the guns that are killing people, it's the people that kill people. And you'll hear politicians say, well, this is a heart issue. You can't legislate a heart issue. Um, and that to me is very much a dualism. Like, hey, it's either a heart issue or it's a legislative issue. And the law shouldn't speak to something that's a heart issue, sort of thing. How can we have public discourse that says both of those are true and we should go down both paths?
Yeah. And I do hear that. And I think Brene Brown probably has one of the best things because, of course, she's from Texas and her family has guns and that. And so it's, asking for gun control is not asking to take away all guns, right? And even in my book, there's some places where I talk about that because I do believe that in some ways behavior modification has failed us. I think one of the things that happened even with the civil rights movement, when you look at the Montgomery boycotts, the bus boycott of Montgomery, what happened there and why it was effective was because it shut down the economic edge in Montgomery. And and so part of the reason why those politicians caved in essentially and allowed black people to sit wherever on the bus was because they lost so much money during that boycott.
Mm.
And so, economically, for businesses to survive and to continue to exist, they knew that they were going to have to change their rules and their laws. That does not mean that hearts were changed, right? And I think a lot of what we see now is you are seeing the sons and the grandsons and daughters and the granddaughters of men and women who were forced to make changes that they did not agree with or um, in their hearts believe, but for businesses to survive and for things to thrive, this is what they did. And so now you have a political climate that allows for voices of um, difference and dissent and to say the things they say and do the things they do, whereas before all of that had to kind of go underground. Now there's room for it all to exist. You know, and so you're seeing that. And so and at the same time, I do think hearts need to be transformed for there to be sustainable change long term. I don't think we get there without the power of love changing hearts and minds, right?
Yeah.
But that's not something laws can do, that's not something love can do. And so sitting and beside that, and I also think we have to allow love to do what love does and participate with our civic and local communities in enacting legislation that does have the most marginalized in mind, that does have people that are harmed in mind. I think you do both, right? Um, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing both. So I think in the issue of gun control and some of these other things, when people have these AR-15 weapons and these semi-automatics, and are they necessary for a regular homeowner that simply just wants a gun to protect themselves? Does it have to be that type of weapon? So is there a place that holds both where you can have a gun, but it's not necessarily this type of gun, you know?
Mhm.
And so, but again, I think when we come to these conversations, because we are so mired in what we believe to be true, we get armored up. And so we don't allow ourselves to be soft enough to hear a possible compromise or a possible thing. It's like it has to be my way or the highway. And
Yeah.
I think one of the things that happens as love begins to transform us is we realize that this is a journey we all have to take, right? And how I dance with love is going to be unique and distinct and personal for me and different from the way that you dance with love. But yet collectively, we're all dancing with love. I heard Reverend Otis Moss say yesterday that what our world needs is a jazz ethic, because
Hmm.
in jazz, there's a point where every instrument has a solo and no instrument is asking the other instrument to be it. The saxophone doesn't ask the drum to be a saxophone. It highlights the drum when it's its time. It highlights the saxophone. It highlights the piano, everything. But then it comes together and it makes this incredible music that's just out of this world. And I think that's how we are as we journey this human existence with love, if we would allow that.
That's yeah, I like that metaphor. And it reminds me of another metaphor that is used often in this country in America, which is it's often referred to as a melting pot, which seems at odds with what you were just talking about in terms of actually celebrating individuality in a sense of making music together, making a beautiful melody, making harmony together, but there's still individuality. Whereas melting pot kind of implies like, hey, everybody needs to get on board and be homogenous. We all need to be the same as same as we possibly can be. And I'm from Canada, where we use a different phrase, which is we're a mosaic, because Canada celebrates its multiculturalism. And yet, I want to be clear that there's no superiority in me saying that, because actually there's very much a danger in that area as well. And we talked about this 45 minutes ago, which is um, if you if you've got diversity but don't know each other, then you're not really taking very many steps forward. And I think that's what we've got very much in Canada is there's great diversity, and we celebrate that and almost get satisfied with that alone. So I just want to say that because I fear I sound like I'm trying to be superior as a Canadian, and I'm not saying that. It's just different. But the melting pot comes with its own challenges, and I'd be interested to know. Uh, I'd just like to hear from you, like as somebody who's got a very different story. You started today's discussion talking about living, coming from the other side of the tracks as an African American woman. Your experience is very different from mine. People will sometimes say, "Well, I don't see color," and I wonder if you find that actually to be a somewhat dismissive, maybe not demeaning, but dismissive in terms of "I don't need to know you" type of a comment.
Yeah, it is dismissive. I find it very dismissive. It lands like a blow to my gut, actually, when
Hmm.
people say it. And I have to step back and know that really they don't mean any harm by it. It's just for them, it sounds like something kind. And part of that is because we've long used this metaphor of a melting pot. And I would say two things about the melting pot. One, I think a melting pot is asking for assimilation and conformity. And when everything melts together, we lose our distinction of personhood. We use our uniqueness, right? So I would much rather be a salad than to be a melted pot. I love all the colors and the beauty and the vibrancy in a wonderful salad. Give me that any day of the week. And so I'll say that. The other thing I will say about the melting pot is in some instances that metaphor is accurate for white-bodied Americans in the sense that when people came through Ellis Island, when white people came through Ellis Island, they came through Ellis Island as Irishmen, Polish, Italians, British, Scottish. They were all very distinct in that. Um, and even initially in coming in, like when people settled in New York, Italians were in one area. They grouped among themselves culturally in that way. But what you saw over time was a melding of um, less of that ethnic kind of distinction into just being Americans, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
they went from being very proud of their, and not that they're not proud of being Irish or Polish or Italian or whatever, but that almost became a footnote that was celebrated inside of food, inside of, those inside of religion, but not necessarily in their day to day. In their day to day, they went to work. I have a friend who actually, their family came over through Ellis Island and they're Italian. But the father changed their name from an Italian name to a more American sounding name because Italians weren't getting work. So, in order for him to get work, he had to change the family's last name. So, one of their sons has actually went back and taken the family's Italian name
Wow.
as his surname and had it changed. But so, in that way, there's a lot of truth to America being a melting pot, but that metaphor did not necessarily include people of color. One, because I another story. My
Yeah.
same daughter, different school now. She had a project where, for history, they had to trace their family roots back to when they came through Ellis Island in that story. And she came home and she was like, "Mom, what do I do with this?" And I emailed the history teacher and I was like, we are a family that are descendants of the enslaved. We did not come through Ellis Island. So are you asking us to trace back the history of those people who owned us and settled on the plantation that our family labored on? What are you actually asking for a person that did not come through those those doors, that gate, that
Yeah.
harbor? What are you asking? And so I think we have to stop and consider that. So for us, people of color that did not come through Ellis Island, that's not our story. We're not melted in that way. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times when that language was used, it was not considering Black people or people of color, at all inside of that. I also would say, with the melting pot thing, for me, love sees fully and love what love sees. I cannot not be a Black person. That's who I am, you
Yeah.
know? Um, I mean, I could probably do some skin whitening things or whatever, but even inside of that, I'm still going to be a, a Black person. That's a part of me. And so when you say that you see me and you love me, it is to love this part of me because this is very much a part of who I am. And love sees fully and love what it sees,
Yeah.
and so I invite people when they say they don't see color, i I invite them to reconsider that.
You talk about the desire to fix things, which actually made me giggle because I was just in a conversation with another husband the other day where I was like, I think we've been told, I've been married 21 years, so I'm starting to get the hang of it. And I said, I think as husbands, we've been told, like, no, you don't have to fix, just listen. But the tendency always is like, yeah, but I could let me help you fix this sort of a thing. Or we try to, we just try to listen and they're like, aren't you going to do something about it? It's like, I don't know. How do I know which time this is? But so that was where my mind immediately went, was as a husband. But in terms of, I then thought back, and you put it in this context in terms of all that went on in the last few years after George Floyd and things like that. And there was this, very much an outpouring, a stirring amongst many people across the country of what I think we were trying to do was empathy, but then there was also this like, but we got to do something and we don't know what to do. Where, where do we, where should we rest in terms of trying to know another community, such as the Black community, here, like, be with you in your grief, uh, and empathize, but then also say, but we need to stand up and say this isn't right and we need to fix it. Where's the balance?
That's a really great question, and I have all the thoughts about it. My first thought I'm going to share is, I have the pleasure of knowing a um, very well read, well respected person that is in their mid 80s and in their heyday was just all the things that you would want to say of an ally, a co-conspirator, um, you know, people probably would have said of them that they were more like a rebel rouser, but just stood on the side of right, stood on the side of right. And a lot of how they got to those ideas of rightness was through reading. And this is not to say that reading is wrong, so I don't want people to mishear that. Um, but inside of reading, inside of deciding, making an apologist kind of decision for right, this is how this person showed up in the world, and it's been beautiful. But as time and cognitive issues um, dance with this person's being, and they go back to what's inside, um, people are surprised sometimes at what comes out of their mouth.
Mm.
Um, and so I share that because, again, when our hearts are not transformed, we can read all the books, learn all the right things to say, do all the right things. But if someone steps on my foot just the wrong way, the truth of how I feel about that person or that situation comes to the fore because it hasn't has time to go through filters of fix it up, dress it up, pretty it up, make it social media ready lens. It's just a natural thing. And so I get this question often for people of what do I do? How do I stand in solidarity with our African American brothers and sisters? What can I do? Tell me, tell me, tell me. And once I was speaking with an interviewer, and I just kept saying over and over, um, heal thyself, heal thyself, turn inward,
Mm.
turn inward. When the truth of our being matches the way of our being, and we learn to love ourselves, our landscape, our outlook is going to begin and end with love. If I hate myself, if I am still judging and critiquing myself, I can't extend hospitality to someone else, not authentically, not genuinely. I can dress it up, pretty it up, say the right things, but underneath that, because I have not learned to be compassionate and benevolent and kind and see my own self as a gift, as a burning bush, as a sacred, inherent human. I don't know how to offer that truly. And I can't give away something that I don't have. So
Yeah.
we first have to start with ourselves and our own journey with love. And in that homecoming, what happens as we, Howard Thurman talks about the inward journey, as we encounter love in our inward journey and we are transformed, the sound of the genuine rises up and out of us, and we become love bearers, and
Mm.
we ignite a revolution of love that changes a story that is not one of domination, revolution, victimization, or any of that. It is just a story of love and belonging and kindness and compassion and goodwill. We get there with ourselves first.
Yeah.
If you are a person in your head, read books. If you are a person in your heart or your gut, sit and allow yourself to receive love. How you get there in itself is a journey as well. But I don't think we get there just rushing to fix. We do have to first sit with, be with, grieve, allow truth as hard as it is, feel the discomfort with our feet rooted and not run away from it. And
Yeah.
not because, and Doug and I too have that same kind of joke in our relationship. We've been married over 30 years. And we say, do you want me to listen like a girl or listen like a guy? And and forgive me to my, non-gender affirming friends that but it's the masculine energy, feminine energy, because masculine energy does the first thing I want to do is fix it and make it right.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to get over whatever is wrong quickly, because I also don't know what to do with this discomfort inside, that's sitting between us.
Yeah.
And so my first thing is to make it right, and so we often do that because I'm the fixer in our family a lot of times, and I'm gonna rush to, and so I'm like, oh wait, I was just supposed to be listening, right? Like, so I do think that,
I
yes.
love it. You have used a phrase a few times that I really like, and I'd love for you to just give us a little bit more behind it. You've described yourself and others as a burning bush. And I've never heard that before. Could you just like, I love that. I mean, obviously, I know the story to which you're alluding, but just put tell us a little bit about where that came from.
I'm almost pretty sure that I stole this phrase from Paul Young. Um, Paul Young has been such a major influence on my life, and so I'm pretty sure that I heard Paul use it in a sermon that he preached. But it actually comes from the Bible when Moses encounters the burning bush, and when he comes up to the burning bush, and God says to him, take off your shoes, you're on holy ground. And he's watching this bush that's burning, but it's not being consumed.
Hmm.
But and so it's like, a sign and a wonder, and it captures his attention, and he turns toward it. And then in the turning toward, God says to him, take off your shoes, you're on holy ground. And so I think of all of us as little light beings that we are filled with the divine. We are filled, made in the image and likeness of love. We are at our core, we are love beings that radiate the light of goodness, that radiate the light of the divine. And so with that image of Moses from that scripture in the Old Testament, because I literally just had a brain block of where it actually is in the Bible, but Old Testament, um, I want to see people in that way, that when I encounter them, I think in my head, take off your shoes, Felicia. You are on holy ground. This is a person that is burning but not consumed. The light of love radiates within them, and they are shining brightly. There might be dung covering the bush right now, but still there's a light. Still
Yeah,
there's a light. This is a
yeah,
burning bush, you know.
yeah,
And so that's the posture of my heart that I
yeah,
I want to have. That's what I miss it. I'm human, but that is my aspiration always, always, that whomever is before me, that I
yeah.
remember.
One of the things that I notice about the way you talk, the way you write, is you talk about love as God. Like I mean, John tells us God is love, and so you just take John at his word, and you like love is capitalized throughout here, just like Lord is capitalized in Scripture. Like it, and I am so challenged by that, um, and I think it's beautiful, and yeah, I want to be like you when I grow up, Felicia.
Thank you. A lot of people are challenged by it. I think for me, when I fell into my own deconstruction and had some time away from the institutional church based on some wounding that happened,
Mhm.
it hurt me so deeply that I literally probably could have walked away from it all,
Mm.
including God, the
Yeah.
idea of God, church, all of it. The thing that kept me rooted was having an encounter with love that changed me. I had been in church for years, read the Bible for years, prayed for years, did all the things for years, and I was still a very angry person. I still was not kind. I still was. My Sunday school teachers would say, Miss Felicia's so mad. She's always so mad. And so I've even just had to ask my Sunday school students forgiveness for being a mad Christian.
Hmm.
Um, but when love changed me, and it was an encounter with God as love, the Bible didn't do that. Love did that. Being in the presence of God face to face to face, receiving love into every part of me changed who I am. And so for me, um, I'm not trapped in what to call. I know a lot of people do get challenged by it and are um, you know, some people are offended by it even, but for me, love changed me. And I will always see the divine as love, because for me, the divine is love, and it's not just a theory, it is actually a real.
And again, just bringing it back to like John said so, right? God is love. So, like I say, you just took John at his word, and I think that's just absolutely beautiful, and has been your experience and your restorative experience. You talk about the restorative power of love, and you're living proof of that, and it's beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Our time has come to an end, which is a bummer. I'm really enjoying this, but I want to recommend to our listeners. I know I do this every week, but I really, really mean it this time. Like this book, it will challenge you, it will comfort you, it will get in your face in the most gentle, loving way. I don't know how to describe it. It's full of poetry and just these like it's so different and it's so beautiful and I love it. So it's brand new. In fact, mine says not for resale, advanced reader copy. So you can't have this one. But I think by the time this episode airs, we're recording it a couple weeks early, but I think by the time this episode airs, it will be available. It's available for pre-order right now. Where should people go buy it, Felicia? Is it just Amazon or what?
It is available wherever books are sold, so they can get it through independent booksellers at bookshop.org. Whitaker House has it on their website, Barnes and Noble, Amazon for sure. All the places where books are sold, they should be
Yeah.
able to find this book. So
Marvelous. Well, go do it, folks. Go do it. And you can have a chance to hang out with Felicia a little bit because, Felicia, I understand that you are going on a book tour. You're even going to be right here back in the 505, as we call it, ABQ, Albuquerque, on March 3rd. What are some of the other stops along your tour?
yeah, I'll be starting my tour in Norfolk, Virginia on February 17th. And then from there, Nashville, Tennessee, Atlanta, Georgia, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then back in Atlanta. So I will, Atlanta was home for a little bit, but yeah, so I'll get to experience those places. And then hopefully some other places will open up as the book gets out to other people, but that's the initial book tour.
Awesome. Where can people find you? If people want to follow along and get to know you a little bit better, are you on the social media or what do you do?
People can follow me on Facebook. I'm always there giving my opinions very freely to the world. I share a lot of poetry on my Instagram page. It's at Hello Felicia _ Murrell, Murrell. So those are the two places on social media. And then if someone would like to reach out personally, they can go to my website, FeliciaMurrell.com, and
That's
reach
nice
out
and
to me.
easy.
Yeah.
Awesome. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and I'm going to sign off with our listeners. But if you're able to stick around for a couple minutes, I know my dad's down the hall, and he's very eager to get some time with you as well. So, but for now, I will say goodbye to our viewing audience. If you are watching, you're watching on YouTube, but you can just see us at Impact Nations / at. No, sorry, wrong way, backwards. YouTube / at Impact Nations. I do that every week. I should get it right. YouTube.com / at Impact Nations. You can see all of this season and others. We're on season 8 of the Impact Nations podcast, folks. It's amazing. There's so much material there. So check it all out. Plus, there's all sorts of great videos of lives rescued and restored all over the world. So it will inspire you. Be sure to check it out. Hit subscribe and then hit the bell. That way you get the notification. You know the deal. Or if you like to listen, you can do that as well. Just subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Just look for the Impact Nations podcast and you will find us. I'm sorry that the name is so pedestrian. We had no idea what we were doing when we got it started all those years ago. But we're having fun doing it and we're so thankful for our listening audience. It's growing. Hey, leave us a 5-star review if you could. How's that for brash? Just leave us a 5-star review. Come on, do it. It helps other people discover us and get to know people like Felicia. So do that. We're releasing episodes every single Thursday. So we'll see you again next week. God bless. Have a good week.